The courtroom doors slammed shut, echoing like a gunshot in the silent hall. Everyone stared at Eleanor, her coat threadbare, her hands trembling as she clutched two toddlers to her chest. Across the aisle, Mark smirked, adjusting his silk tie, while his mistress, Jessica, whispered something cruel in his ear and laughed. They thought this was over. They thought money could buy silence. But they didn't see the file resting under Judge Harrison's gavel. In exactly 10 minutes, a secret buried for 5 years would turn this hearing into a war zone, and the woman laughing in the front row was about to lose everything she thought she had stolen. The rain in Seattle didn't wash things clean. It just made the grime stick harder. Elena stood under the awning of a rundown bus stop on 4th Avenue, shielding the stroller with her body. Inside, Leo and Mia, her 3-year-old twins, were finally asleep, oblivious to the fact that their mother was down to her last $20. 5 years ago, Elena wouldn't have recognized the woman reflected in the passing shop windows. Back then, she was Eleanor Vance, the bright-eyed graphic designer who had fallen in love with Mark Sterling, a charming, ambitious man with big dreams and empty pockets. She had supported him, worked double shifts, and even sold her grandmother's jewelry to fund the startup of his tech consultancy firm, Sterling Solutions. "We're a team, Elle," Mark used to say, kissing her forehead. "When I make it, you'll never work a day in your life again." He made it, all right. But the we didn't survive the ascent. As the money poured in, Mark changed. The late nights at the office turned into weekends away. The affection turned into criticism. He started complaining about her appearance, her clothes, her exhaustion. Then came Jessica. Jessica Vance, no relation, though she liked to joke she was born to be a Sterling, was everything Elena wasn't anymore. Polished, expensive, and ruthless. She was Mark's new VP of marketing, and soon she was the woman in his passenger seat. When Elena found out, Mark didn't apologize. He handed her eviction papers. "I need someone who fits the brand, Elena," he had said cold-heartedly, standing in the foyer of the mansion Elena had decorated. "You're just tired. Take the kids. I'll send a check." But the checks were sporadic. Then they stopped. Mark hired expensive lawyers to stall the divorce proceedings, bleeding Elena dry until she couldn't afford a lawyer of her own. He wanted her to crawl back and beg or simply disappear. Instead, she moved into a cramped studio apartment in the worst part of town, working as a night shift janitor to keep Leo and Mia fed. Today was the final hearing, the custody hearing. Mark had suddenly decided he wanted full custody, not because he loved the twins, Elena knew, but because it would look good for his upcoming Family Man of the Year feature in Forbes. "Mama?" Leo whimpered, waking up as a cold gust of wind hit the stroller. "It's okay, baby," Elena whispered, her voice cracking. "We're going to see the judge today. We're going to fix this." She checked her watch. It was cheap plastic, a replacement for the Cartier Mark had taken back for safekeeping. 8:30 a.m. Court started at 9 p.m. She pushed the stroller into the rain, her shoes soaking through instantly. She had no umbrella, no car, and no lawyer. All she had was a crumpled envelope in her pocket, a document she had found while packing up the last of her boxes months ago. She didn't fully understand what it meant, but she knew it was the only reason Mark had been calling her non-stop for the last 24 hours. He wasn't calling to check on the kids. He was calling because he was scared. The King County Superior Court was a fortress of marble and mahogany, designed to make small people feel smaller. Elena felt microscopic as she navigated the security checkpoint. The guards looked sympathetically at the wet, exhausted woman with 2 toddlers, but they didn't offer help. There was no pity in the legal system, only procedure. When she pushed the double doors of courtroom 4B open, The warmth of the room hit her like a physical blow. It smelled of floor wax and expensive cologne. And there they were. Mark sat at the plaintiff's table, looking like $1 million in a bespoke navy suit. He was typing on his phone, looking bored. Next to him sat Arthur P. Grimm, the most vicious divorce attorney in the state. Grimm was known as the Butcher, because he didn't just win cases, he destroyed the opposing party's future. In the gallery directly behind Mark sat Jessica. She wore a white cashmere dress that probably cost more than Eleanor's entire year of rent. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a severe, chic bun. When she saw Eleanor enter, a smirk played on her red lips. She nudged Mark. Mark looked up. His eyes scanned Eleanor's soggy coat and the scuffed stroller. He didn't look at his children. He looked at her shoes. "You're late," Mark hissed across the aisle as Eleanor struggled to park the stroller near the defendant's bench. "Court hasn't started, Mark," Eleanor replied, her voice shaking but audible. She lifted Mia out of the stroller, then Leo. They clung to her legs, wide-eyed and silent. "You brought them?" Jessica spoke up, her voice dripping with faux concern. "Mark, honey, look at them. They look malnourished. And those clothes, are they from a donation bin?" "Shut up, Jessica," Elena snapped. It was the first time in a year she had raised her voice at the woman. Jessica's eyes widened, then narrowed into slits. "Enjoy your sass while you can, sweetie. By noon, those kids will be with a nanny who actually knows how to dress them, and you'll be on the street." "Order!" The bailiff's voice boomed. "All rise for the Honorable Judge Harrison." Judge Silas Harrison walked in. He was an older man, with steel-grey hair and a face that looked like it had been carved out of granite. He was known for two things: his absolute hatred for courtroom theatrics and his uncanny ability to smell a lie. He sat down, adjusted his glasses, and looked over the rim at the two parties. He looked at Mark, polished and smug. Then he looked at Elena, dripping wet, holding two children who looked terrified. "Case number 49201, Sterling versus Sterling," the clerk announced. "Mr. Grimm," Judge Harrison said, his voice deep and gravelly. "You may begin." Grimm stood up, buttoning his jacket. He didn't even look at Eleanor. He addressed the judge with the confidence of a man who had already bought the victory. "Your Honor, this is a simple case," Grimm began, pacing the floor. "My client, Mr. Mark Sterling, is the CEO of a multi-million-dollar corporation. He can provide a stable, luxurious, and educational environment for the children. The mother, Ms. Vance," he gestured vaguely at Elena, as if she were a stain on the carpet, "is currently unemployed, homeless, living in a motel, I believe, and clearly unstable. We are asking for full legal and physical custody, with supervised visitation for the mother, pending a psychiatric evaluation." Elena gasped. "I'm not homeless. I have an apartment, and I work." "Silence, Miss Vance," the judge said. Though his tone wasn't harsh, he turned to Grimm. "You claim she is unstable?" "She drags these children through the rain," Grimm continued, pointing at the wet floor around Eleanor. "She refuses financial aid." "He never sent it," Eleanor cried out, unable to stop herself. "Miss Vance, you will have your turn," Judge Harrison warned, his eyes sharp. Mark leaned back, whispering to Jessica. They chuckled. They were enjoying this. To them, this wasn't a family tragedy. It was a spectator sport. "We have bank statements," Grimm said, handing a thick stack of papers to the bailiff, showing that Mr. Sterling has attempted to transfer funds, which were rejected. "We also have testimony from a private investigator claiming Ms. Vance leaves the children unattended at night." "That's a lie!" Elena's heart pounded against her ribs. "I work nights. My neighbor, Mrs. Gable, watches them." "A neighbor with a criminal record," Grimm shot back smoothly. Elena froze. She didn't know that. Mrs. Gable was a sweet old lady. Had they dug that deep? Judge Harrison flipped through the papers Grimm had submitted. His face remained unreadable. He looked at the bank statements. Then he looked at Mark. "Mr. Sterling," the judge said, "you claim you are the sole provider?" "Yes, Your Honor," Mark said, standing up and projecting his CEO voice. "I built Sterling Solutions from the ground up. I pay for everything. I just want what's best for Leo and Mia. And Ms. Jessica Tate?" The judge looked at the woman in the gallery. "What is her relation to the children?" "She is my fiancée," Mark lied. They weren't engaged yet, not legally. "She is eager to step in as a mother figure." Jessica beamed, giving a little wave to the judge. "I love kids, Your Honor." Eleanor felt sick. She gripped the edge of the table. They were winning. They were painting a picture of a perfect life that she couldn't compete with. "Very well," Judge Harrison said. He closed the file Grimm had given him. "Ms. Vance, you do not have counsel." "No, Your Honor. I couldn't afford one." "Then you may speak for yourself. Why should you keep custody of these children?" Elena took a deep breath. She looked down at Leo, who was playing with a button on her wet coat. She looked at Mark, who was checking his watch again. "Because I am their mother," Elena said, her voice quiet but gaining strength. "I was there when they were sick and Mark was at a conference in Vegas. I was there for their first steps while Mark was buying sports cars. He doesn't want them, Your Honor. He wants props. And regarding the money..." She reached into her pocket and pulled out the crumpled envelope. "Mr. Grimm says Mark built his company from the ground up," Elena said, her hand shaking as she placed the envelope on the table. "But that's not true, and I have proof." Mark's head snapped up. Jessica stopped smiling. "Objection!" Grimm shouted immediately. "Surprise evidence is not admissible." "This isn't a criminal trial, Mr. Grimm," Judge Harrison said, his interest piqued. "And in family court, I decide what is admissible involving the welfare of minors. Bring it here." The bailiff took the envelope from Eleanor and walked it up to the bench. Mark's face went pale. He whispered frantically to Jessica, "Is that the deed? Did she find the deed?" "You told me you burned it," Jessica hissed back, her veneer of calm cracking for the first time. Judge Harrison opened the envelope. He pulled out a single, yellowed piece of paper. The room went silent. The only sound was the rustling of paper as the judge read. He read it once. Then he adjusted his glasses and read it again. Slowly, Judge Harrison lowered the paper. He didn't look at Eleanor. He looked directly at Mark Sterling. The look was no longer neutral. It was predatory. "Mr. Sterling," the judge said, his voice dropping an octave, rumbling like distant thunder. "You are under oath, correct?" "Yes, Your Honor," Mark stammered, sweat beading on his forehead. "And you stated for the record that you are the sole owner of Sterling Solutions and all its assets." Yes. Yes, I am." Judge Harrison held up the yellowed paper. "Then can you explain to this court why this document, notarized 5 years ago, lists the primary shareholder and intellectual property owner of your software as..." "Elena Vance?" Jessica gasped, loud enough for the whole room to hear. Mark froze. The trap had just snapped shut. Judge Harrison opened the envelope. He pulled out a single, yellowed piece of paper. The room went silent. The only sound was the rustling of paper as the judge read. He read it once. Then he adjusted his glasses and read it again. Slowly, Judge Harrison lowered the paper. He didn't look at Elena. He looked directly at Mark Sterling. The look was no longer neutral. It was predatory. "Mr. Sterling," the judge said, his voice dropping an octave, rumbling like distant thunder. "You are under oath. correct?" "Yes, Your Honor," Mark stammered, sweat beading on his forehead. "And you stated for the record that you are the sole owner of Sterling Solutions and all its assets." Yes. Yes, I am." Judge Harrison held up the yellowed paper. "Then can you explain to this court why this document, notarized 5 years ago, lists the primary shareholder and intellectual property owner of your software as Elena Vance?" Jessica gasped, loud enough for the whole room to hear. Mark froze. The trap had just snapped shut. The silence in courtroom 4B was shattered by the sound of Arthur Grimm slamming his hand onto the table. It wasn't a gesture of power anymore. It was the desperate reflex of a man realizing he had been walked off a cliff by his own client. "Let me see that," Grimm barked, forgetting all protocol. The bailiff, upon a nod from Judge Harrison, handed the yellow document to the high-priced attorney. Grimm scanned it, his eyes darting back and forth behind his rimless glasses. His face, usually a mask of arrogance, drained of color. He looked at the signature at the bottom. It was Mark's, indisputable. Notarized by a clerk in downtown Seattle 5 years ago. This is an operating agreement," Grimm whispered, his voice hoarse. He turned to Mark, his whisper turning into a hiss. "You told me you were the sole proprietor. You told me she was just a housewife." "I am the sole proprietor," Mark shouted, standing up. "That piece of paper is ancient history. It was a formality to get her grandmother's money. It doesn't mean anything." "Sit down, Mr. Sterling," Judge Harrison roared. The thunder in his voice made Leo start to cry. Elena immediately scooped him up, rocking him gently, but her eyes never left Mark. She saw something she had never seen before. Fear. True, unadulterated fear. "Mr. Sterling," the judge said, his voice dangerously calm. "In my court, a notarized contract regarding the founding of a company is not ancient history. It is evidence. And according to this text, specifically Clause 4, Section A, in exchange for seed capital provided by the Vance family estate, Elena Vance retains 60% majority ownership of all intellectual property and future assets of the entity known as Sterling Solutions, until such time that the initial investment is repaid tenfold." The judge lowered the paper and looked at Mark over his spectacles. "Mr. Sterling, did you repay the initial investment of $50,000 tenfold? Did you pay Ms. Vance $500,000? Mark opened his mouth, then closed it. He looked at Jessica. Jessica wasn't looking at him. She was staring at the judge, her mouth slightly open, doing the math in her head. "No," Mark croaked. "But I paid for the house. I paid for the cars. That counts." "That counts as marital assets," the judge corrected sharply, "not repayment of a business loan. Which means, legally speaking, Ms. Vance is not just your wife. She is your majority shareholder. She is your boss." A ripple of murmurs went through the few people in the back of the courtroom. "This is ridiculous." Jessica suddenly stood up, unable to contain herself. Her poise was gone. "He runs the company. She scrubs toilets. You can't possibly say she owns our future. Ms. Tate, if you speak out of turn one more time, I will have you removed," Judge Harrison warned. "And you might want to be careful. If Ms. Vance is the majority owner, then the company funds you've been enjoying, the corporate card, the leased Mercedes I see listed in the financial disclosure, might technically be considered embezzlement of her dividends." Jessica dropped back into her seat, as if she'd been shot. She looked at Mark with horror. "Mark? Is that true?" Mark was sweating profusely now. "It's a technicality, Jess. Don't listen to him. We can fight this." "Grimm, do something!" Grimm stood up slowly. He smoothed his tie, distancing himself physically from Mark. "Your Honor, I request a brief recess to..." Consult with my client regarding this new evidence. It appears there has been a significant miscommunication regarding the asset disclosure." "Request denied," Judge Harrison said instantly. "We are here to determine the best interest of these children today. We were told the mother is destitute. We were told she has no means to support them. But if this document is valid, she is potentially worth millions. The question now isn't about custody, Mr. Grimm. It's about why a woman worth millions is living in a motel while her husband buys a second yacht." The judge turned his gaze to Elena. "Ms. Vance, were you aware of this document's value?" Elena swallowed hard. I knew I signed papers when my grandmother gave us the money, but Mark always handled the finances. He told me the company was in debt for years. He told me we were barely scraping by, even when we moved into the big house. He said the cars were leased by the bank. I trusted him. He told you the company was in debt?" The judge flipped open the financial binder Grimm had submitted earlier. According to Mr. Sterling's own brag sheet, submitted to this court to prove his financial superiority, Sterling Solutions posted a net profit of $4 million last year. Elena gasped. $4 million. She looked down at her worn-out sneakers. She thought about the nights she skipped dinner so the twins could have extra milk. She thought about the humiliation of begging her landlord for an extension on the rent. "He lied," Elena whispered, tears welling up. "He lied about everything." "It appears so," Judge Harrison said. He looked at the court stenographer. "Let the record show that the financial disparity claiming the mother is unfit is hereby challenged by evidence of concealed assets. Furthermore, I am ordering an immediate forensic audit of Sterling Solutions." "Now wait a minute," Mark yelled, panic taking over completely. "You can't do that. That's my company. You can't just open my books because of a piece of paper she pulled out of the trash." "I can and I will," Judge Harrison replied coolly. "In fact, given the severity of this concealment, I am freezing all marital assets effective immediately, including the corporate accounts." The color drained from Jessica's face completely. "Freezing?" she squeaked. What about the trip to Aspen next week? What about the remodel?" Mark ignored her. He was glaring at Elena with pure hatred. "You set me up," he snarled. "You played the victim just to blindside me." "I didn't know, Mark," Elena cried out. "I just wanted my kids. You're the one who dragged us here. You're the one who wanted to show off." "And show off he did," Judge Harrison muttered. He picked up his gavel. "However, this hearing has taken a turn. We are no longer just dealing with custody. We are dealing with potential fraud. Mr. Grimm, I suggest you advise your client to stop talking, because the district attorney visits this courthouse frequently." Grimm looked at Mark. "Shut up," he said, loud and clear. "Not another word, Mark." But the drama was far from over, because while Mark was silenced, the person sitting behind him was just getting started. Jessica Tate was a survivor. She had climbed her way up from nothing, using her looks and her sharp wit to attach herself to powerful men. She thought Mark Sterling was her golden ticket. She had tolerated his arrogance, his snoring, and his boring stories because he promised her the world. But now, she was watching that world dissolve. The judge had just frozen the accounts. The millions Mark claimed to have were actually Elena's. And worse, the word embezzlement was floating in the air. Jessica knew what happened to girlfriends of embezzlers. They got subpoenaed. They got their closets raided by the FBI. She looked at Mark's sweating neck. She looked at Elena, who was looking more powerful by the second, clutching that damning piece of paper. Jessica made a calculation. The ship was sinking. It was time to grab a life raft. "Your Honor?" Jessica's voice rang out. clear and steady. "Jessica, don't," Mark hissed, turning around. "Ms. Tate," Judge Harrison said, looking over his glasses, "you are not a party to this case." "I have information relevant to the children's welfare," Jessica said, standing up and walking to the railing. She didn't look at Mark. She looked straight at the judge. "And relevant to the finances." "Object!" Grimm shouted. "She is not under oath." "Swear her in," Judge Harrison commanded the bailiff. Mark's eyes bulged. "Jess, what are you doing?" "Saving myself, Mark," she whispered coldly as she passed him. She placed her hand on the Bible, swore to tell the truth, and took the witness stand. The courtroom was dead silent. Even the twins seemed to sense the tension and watched with wide eyes. "Ms. Tate," the judge said, "what do you have to say?" "Mark has been planning to flee the country with the children," Jessica stated flatly. The room erupted. Elena screamed, covering her mouth. Mark jumped up, knocking his chair over. "You lying witch!" "Order! Order!" Judge Harrison banged the gavel so hard the wood chipped. "Marshals, restrain Mr. Sterling." Two burly officers stepped forward, forcing Mark back into his chair. He was red-faced, veins bulging in his neck. "Continue, Miss Tate," the judge said, his voice deadly serious. "He told me last night," Jessica said, smoothing her skirt. "He knew Elena might have the contract. He's been trying to find it for weeks. He said if things went wrong today, he'd take the kids to a non-extradition country. He has passports for them, hidden in a safety deposit box under my name. I didn't know what they were until this morning." "That is a lie," Mark screamed. "She's lying. She's mad about the money." "I have the key in my purse," Jessica said, producing a small silver key. "And I have the text messages." She pulled out her phone. "He texted me at 2 a.m. If the judge sides with the bitch, pack the bags. We leave for Brazil tonight. I won't let her have a dime or the kids." Elena felt the room spin. Brazil? He was going to steal them? He was going to take her babies to another continent just to spite her? "Bailiff, take that phone," Judge Harrison ordered. The bailiff took the phone and handed it to the judge. He scrolled through the messages. His face grew darker with every swipe. "Mr. Grimm," the judge said, not looking up, "your client is in very, very deep trouble." I had no knowledge of this," Grimm stammered, backing away from the table. "I withdraw. I cannot represent a client who conspires to commit international kidnapping." "You can't quit," Mark yelled. "I paid you $50,000. "With my money!" Elena shouted, standing up. The anger finally overtook the fear. "You paid him with my money to steal my children." Mark turned on her, his eyes wild. "They aren't your children. You're nothing. You're a loser, Elena. You were nothing before me, and you'll be nothing after me." "Mr. Sterling, that is enough." Judge Harrison stood up. "Mark Sterling, I am holding you in contempt of court. Officers, take him into custody immediately." "What?" Mark blinked. You can't arrest me. I'm a CEO." "You are a flight risk," the judge declared, "and based on the testimony and evidence of intent to kidnap, I am setting bail at $5 million, which, considering your assets are frozen, might be difficult to post." The officers grabbed Mark's arms. He struggled, thrashing around. "Jessica, tell them you lied! Jessica!" Jessica watched him from the stand, her face impassive. "I don't lie to judges, Mark. Not for a broke man." As they dragged Mark out of the courtroom, he locked eyes with Eleanor. "This isn't over, you hear me? I'll destroy you." The heavy doors slammed shut behind him, cutting off his screams. The silence that followed was heavy. Elena was trembling, holding the twins so tight her knuckles were white. Judge Harrison sat back down. He took a long breath and looked at Elena. His expression softened for the first time. "Miss Vance," he said gently, It appears the immediate danger has been removed. Is he really gone? Eleanor asked, her voice barely a whisper. For now, the judge said. But we have a lot of work to do. First, regarding the children. I am granting you full sole legal and physical custody. Mr. Sterling's visitation rights are suspended indefinitely pending a criminal investigation. Elena let out a sob of relief, burying her face in Leo's hair. Thank you. Secondly, the judge continued, turning to the court clerk. Regarding the assets, I am appointing a special master to oversee Sterling Solutions. Ms. Vance, as the majority shareholder, you have the right to access corporate funds for immediate living expenses. I will sign an order authorizing an immediate transfer of, let's say, $50,000 to your personal account today, to cover housing and legal fees. $50,000. It was more money than Elena had seen in 5 years. However, the judge said, turning his gaze to Jessica, who was trying to sneak off the witness stand. Not so fast, Ms. Tate. Jessica froze. Your Honor? I helped. I told the truth. You admitted to holding a safety deposit box containing illegal travel documents, Judge Harrison said, and you admitted to knowing about the plan since 2 a.m., yet you said nothing until your own financial interests were threatened. Jessica swallowed. I was scared. I'm sure you were, the judge said. But you are also an accomplice. Officers, please detain Ms. Tate for questioning regarding conspiracy to commit kidnapping and potential fraud. The district attorney will want to speak with her. What? Jessica shrieked. No, I turned him in. We had a deal. We made no deal, Judge Harrison said dryly. This is a court of law, not a marketplace. Take her away. Jessica's screams were higher pitched than Mark's as she was led away in handcuffs, kicking her expensive heels against the floor. Elena stood there, the courtroom now almost empty. The nightmare was over, or so she thought. As she packed up the stroller, a man in a dark trench coat who had been sitting in the back row the entire time stood up. He walked over to her. He didn't look like a lawyer. He looked like something else. Miss Vance, he said. His voice was low. Yes? Elena held the kids close. My name is Agent Miller, FBI, he said, flashing a badge. You handled yourself well today. But there's something you need to know. Mark wasn't just hiding money from you. The reason Sterling Solutions made $4 million last year, it wasn't from software. Elena's heart stopped. What do you mean? We've been watching your husband for 6 months, the agent said. He's been laundering money for the cartel, and since you're the legal owner of the company, we need to talk. The interrogation room at the Seattle FBI field office was nothing like the courtroom. It was smaller, colder, and smelled of stale coffee and fear. Elena sat at a metal table, a paper cup of water in front of her. The twins were in the next room, being watched by a child psychologist, blissfully unaware that their mother was technically the CEO of a money laundering operation. Agent Miller paced the room. He was a man who looked like he hadn't slept in a week. He slapped a thick file onto the table. Ms. Vance, Miller started, his voice tired. I'm going to be straight with you. On paper, you are Sterling Solutions. That means on paper you are responsible for laundering approximately $50 million for the Sinaloa cartel over the last 3 years. Elena felt the blood drain from her face. I told you I didn't know. I was scrubbing floors. I was begging for grocery money. We know, Miller said, softening slightly. We've seen your bank accounts. You're clean. But the law is tricky. Since you are the majority shareholder, unless you cooperate fully, the district attorney could charge you with willful negligence or conspiracy. Mark is going down, that's a guarantee. But he's trying to cut a deal. A deal? Elena asked, her stomach churning. He's telling us that you were the mastermind, Miller said, leaning in. He claims he was just the face, and you were the genius graphic designer who created the encryption to hide the money trails. He says that's why the company is in your name, to insulate him. Elena let out a bitter laugh. It was so absurd, yet so Mark. He would throw the mother of his children to the wolves to save himself from a prison sentence. He's lying, Elena said firmly. I haven't touched a computer for Sterling Solutions in 5 years. We believe you, Miller said, but we have a problem. We have Mark's servers. We have the data. But it's encrypted, and Mark isn't giving up the password unless we give him total immunity, which isn't happening. If we can't crack the ledger, the cartel walks, and Mark might get a lighter sentence for lack of evidence on the heavy charges. Miller opened a laptop and spun it around. This is the interface for the accounting software Mark built. Recognize it? Elena looked at the screen. It was a chaotic mess of code and graphics. But then her eyes caught something. The background texture. It wasn't random noise. It was a digital manipulation of a photo. That's the view from our old apartment, Elena whispered. The one we lived in when we first started dating. She leaned closer, the icons on the desktop. They weren't standard icons. They were stylized versions of her sketches, the sketches she used to draw on napkins when they were broke and dreaming of the future. He used my art, Elena realized, a tear sliding down her cheek. He used everything I made for him to hide his dirty money. Can you access it? Miller asked intensely. Elena studied the login prompt. It wasn't a standard password box. It was a visual puzzle. 3 images needed to be aligned. A lighthouse, a wolf, and a rose. It's not a password, Elena said, her voice trembling with a mix of rage and sorrow. It's a memory. Our first date was at the lighthouse. He gave me a rose, and we saw a stray dog we called Wolf. She reached out, her finger hovering over the trackpad. She dragged the icons into a specific triangular alignment, a shape she used to doodle on his notebook margins. Click. The screen flashed green. The chaotic code dissolved, revealing rows and rows of spreadsheets, names, dates, amounts. And next to the amounts were tracking numbers for offshore accounts. Miller's jaw dropped. You just cracked military-grade encryption in 10 seconds. It wasn't military-grade, Elena said, staring at the screen. It was sentimental. He's a narcissist, Agent Miller. He thought he was so smart that he could hide his crimes inside the memories of the wife he threw away. He thought I was too stupid to ever see this screen again. Miller immediately began typing, securing the data. This is it. This is the smoking gun. With this, we don't need Mark's testimony. We have the entire network. Does this mean I'm free? Elena asked. Miller stopped typing. He looked at her with a grave expression. It means you're not going to prison. But free is a relative term, Ms. Vance. What do you mean? Mark was stealing from the cartel, Miller said. Look at column D. The numbers don't match the deposits. He was skimming off the top. About $5 million is missing from the cartel's money. Elena felt cold. He stole from drug lords? Yes. And now that he's in custody and the assets are frozen, they're going to be looking for that money. And since the news just broke that you are the legal owner of the company, they'll come for me, Elena finished the sentence. We need to put you in witness protection, immediately, Miller said. New names, new state, you and the twins. Elena looked at the one-way mirror where her children were playing. She had just won them back. She had just gotten her life back, And now she had to run again? No, Elena said. Miller blinked. Excuse me, these are dangerous people. I am done running, Elena said, standing up. The fear was still there, but something else was overriding it. A mother's ferocity. I ran from Mark's abuse. I ran from poverty. I am not running from his mess. You said Mark stole the money. Where is it? We don't know. That's the one thing not in the ledger. I know where it is, Elena said, a memory surfacing. 6 months ago, he sent the twins a package. A frantic, weird package. It was just a raggedy old teddy bear for Mia. He said, "Keep this safe, it's vintage." I almost threw it out because it smelled like cigars. But Mia loved it. Where is the bear? Miller asked urgently. In the storage unit of my motel, Elena said. Inside that bear isn't stuffing, is it? We need to get to that motel, Miller said, grabbing his radio. Now! The motorcade of black SUVs screeched to a halt in front of the Sunset Inn, a dilapidated motel on the outskirts of Seattle. The rain had turned into a storm, thunder cracking overhead. Stay in the car, Miller ordered Eleanor. He signaled his team. 4 agents with tactical gear moved toward room 104. Eleanor watched from the back seat, clutching Leo and Mia. It's going to be okay, she whispered, though she didn't believe it. The agents kicked the door in. Elena flinched, but there was no gunfire, just shouting. Clear! Miller waved Elena over. She ran through the rain, flanked by agents. Inside the tiny, cramped room that had been her home for a year, things were overturned. The mattress was slashed. The drawers were pulled out. Someone was here, Miller said, grimly holstering his weapon. Recently. The bear, Elena gasped. She ran to the closet. It was empty. Her few boxes of clothes were ripped apart. They took it, Elena cried. They took Mia's bear. Who? Miller asked. Before she could answer, Elena's phone rang. It wasn't her number. It was a burner phone Mark had given her solely for custody calls, which she had kept in her purse. She looked at Miller. He nodded. Put it on speaker, Eleanor answered. Hello? Hello, Mrs. Sterling, a voice answered. It wasn't Mark. The voice was smooth, accented, and terrifyingly calm. Or should I say, Miss Vance? I saw the news. Congratulations on your victory in court. Who is this? Eleanor asked, her voice shaking. My name is Vargas. I am a business associate of your husband. We have been looking for a specific item. A bear. We found your room. But the bear, it was empty. Elena's eyes widened. Empty? Mark is a clever man, Vargas continued. He didn't put the diamonds in the bear. He put a tracker in the bear to see if we would find it. A decoy. Very smart. But now I am tired of games. Mark is in a cell where I cannot easily reach him yet. But you are very accessible. I don't have what you want, Elena screamed. I hate him. I turned him in. I don't care about your marital problems, Vargas sighed. Mark stole $5 million in uncut diamonds from us. He told us that if anything happened to him, his wife held the key to the real location. He sold you out, Elena. He told us you have the diamonds. Elena felt like she was going to vomit. Mark had set her up as a human shield. Even from behind bars, he was trying to get her killed. He's lying, Elena yelled. He hates me. Perhaps. But until I have my property, you and those beautiful twins are a liability. You have 24 hours to find the diamonds and bring them to Pier 59. Or the next time you see your children, it will be in a closed casket. The line went dead. Elena dropped the phone. She collapsed onto the slashed mattress, sobbing. He didn't leave anything. He didn't give me anything. Agent Miller crouched down. Think, Elena. Mark is a creature of habit. If the bear was a decoy, where is the real hiding spot? What is the one thing he knows you would never throw away? The one thing you would keep safe no matter what? Elena wiped her eyes. She thought about the last 5 years. Mark had taken everything. The jewelry, the house, the car. He had stripped her life bare. He didn't give me anything, she repeated. Except... Her hand went to her neck. She was wearing a cheap silver locket. It was tarnished. Mark had given it to her when the twins were born. It was the only gift he hadn't asked for back during the separation, because he said it was junk silver. "Let me see that," Miller said. Elena unclasped the locket. Inside were tiny photos of Leo and Mia as babies. Miller took a small pocket knife and pried behind the photos. The backing popped off. There were no diamonds, but there was a micro SD card taped to the metal. The ledger was the digital proof, Miller realized. But this is the leverage. He slotted the card into a reader on his tactical vest. He checked the files on his phone. "It's not diamonds," Miller said, looking up in shock. "It's a recording, and bank codes." "A recording of what?" Miller pressed play. Mark's voice, drunk and bragging, filled the room. He was talking to someone else. "Yeah, Vargas thinks he runs the show, but I'm funneling the crypto through the Cayman accounts. I've got the passwords right here. If he ever tries to touch me, I drain the entire Sinaloa operational fund. 500 million. I own him." Miller stopped the recording. "Mark didn't steal 5 million. He stole the keys to 500 million, and he framed you as the holder of the key. So Vargas kills me. He gets nothing," Elena realized. "But he thinks I have diamonds." "Mark wants you dead," Miller said, his face hardening. "He told Vargas you have diamonds, so Vargas would eliminate you. If you're dead, Mark becomes the sole parent again, and the sole owner of the company. He thinks he can beat the charges, get out, and then use this card to disappear with the money." It was the ultimate evil. Mark was orchestrating a hit on his own wife from prison, using the cartel as his weapon. Elena stood up. The fear evaporated. It was replaced by a cold, hard resolve. She looked at the destroyed room. She looked at her terrified children. "Mark wants a war?" Elena said, grabbing the micro SD card from Miller's hand. "Fine, I'll give him one." "What are you doing?" Miller asked. "I'm not going to witness protection," Elena said. "I'm going to the pier. I'm going to meet Vargas." "Absolutely not," Miller said. "It's a suicide mission." "No," Elena said, her eyes blazing. "It's a business meeting. Mark thinks he's the CEO. He forgot. I own 60% of the company. That makes me the boss, and I'm about to fire him. Elena, you can't... I have the codes to their $500 million, right?" Elena held up the card. "That means I have more leverage than Mark ever did. I'm going to make Vargas a deal. He gets his money back, and in exchange, he gives me Mark." Miller stared at her. He saw the transformation complete. The battered, exhausted wife was gone. In her place was a woman who had walked through fire and decided she liked the heat. "If we do this," Miller said slowly, "we do it my way. Wires, snipers, and you don't hand over that card until Vargas admits to the conspiracy." "Deal," Elena said. She kissed the twins on their heads. "Mrs. Gable can watch them tonight. I have work to do." She walked out into the storm, the cheap silver locket swinging around her neck. She wasn't Elena, the victim, anymore. She was Elena Vance, majority shareholder, and she was about to close the biggest deal of her life. Pier 59 was a skeletal industrial wasteland, jutting out into the dark waters of Puget Sound. The storm was raging, rain lashing sideways against the rusted shipping containers. Elena stood alone under a flickering halogen light, her coat soaked through. She looked small against the towering cranes, but she stood with her feet planted wide, just like she used to when facing down Mark during his drunken rages. She checked her watch. Midnight. A black SUV rolled slowly out of the shadows, its headlights cutting through the rain. It stopped 10 yards away. 2 men in suits got out, holding umbrellas. Then a third man emerged. He was older, elegant, wearing a coat that cost more than Elena's life savings. Vargas. He walked toward her, his shoes clicking on the wet concrete. He stopped 5 feet away. He smelled of expensive tobacco and death. "Mrs. Sterling," Vargas said, his voice carrying over the wind. "You are punctual. I admire that. Do you have my diamonds?" "There are no diamonds," Elena said loud and clear. The 2 guards reached into their jackets. "Wait," Vargas raised a hand. He looked at Elena with amusement. "You came here to tell me you have nothing? That is a very brave way to commit suicide." "Mark lied to you," Elena said, not flinching. "He told you I had diamonds so you would kill me. He wanted to tie up a loose end. But Mark didn't steal 5 million in stones, Vargas. He stole the keys to your entire Cayman network. $500 million. Vargas's smile vanished. His eyes went cold. "That is impossible. Only I have the master keys." "He built a back door," Elena said. She held up the micro SD card. "It's all here. The encryptions, the routing numbers, the passwords. He was going to drain your accounts the moment he made bail. He was going to rob you blind and leave me to take the fall." Vargas stared at the tiny chip in her hand. For the first time, the cartel boss looked unsettled. "Give it to me." "No," Elena said. Vargas took a step forward. "I will take it from your corpse." "If you kill me," Elena said, her voice steady, "the transfer triggers automatically. I set a dead man's switch on the server before I came here. If I don't enter a code on my phone in..." She checked her watch. 5 minutes. The entire 500 million is donated to the DEA's seizure fund. Vargas froze. It was a bluff. It had to be. But could he risk $500 million on a guess? Mark Sterling was a computer genius. It was plausible his wife knew his tricks. "What do you want?" Vargas hissed. "I want a trade," Elena said. "I give you the card. You get your money back. But in exchange, you do something for me." "Name it." "Mark Sterling," Elena said, the name tasting like ash in her mouth. "He thinks he's safe in jail. He thinks he can buy his way out. I want you to ensure that never happens." Vargas tilted his head. "You want me to kill him?" "No," Elena said. "Death is too easy. I want him to live. I want him to live a long, miserable life. I want you to ensure no lawyer takes his case. I want you to ensure his hidden assets in the Caymans, the money he stole from you, disappear so he can't pay for a defense. I want him to rot in a cell with a public defender, knowing he has nothing. Bankrupt him. Completely." Vargas studied her for a long moment. Then a slow smile spread across his face. "You are ruthless, Mrs. Sterling. I like that. Mark was a fool to leave you." "I'm not Mrs. Sterling," she corrected him. "I'm Ms. Vance, the CEO of Sterling Solutions." She tossed the micro SD card through the rain. Vargas caught it. "The money stays in your accounts," Elena said. "But Mark is yours to destroy financially." "Done," Vargas said, pocketing the card. "It has been a pleasure doing business." He turned to leave. His guards lowered their hands. They got back into the SUV. As the taillights faded into the dark, Elena let out a breath she felt she had been holding for 5 years. She reached into her pocket and pulled out her phone. She typed a code. Not to stop a money transfer. That was a lie. But to signal Agent Miller. "Now," she whispered. Suddenly, Floodlights blinded the pier. Sirens wailed from every direction. The black SUV was swarmed by FBI tactical vehicles before it could reach the gate. Elena watched as Vargas was pulled out of the car, shouting. Agent Miller had been listening to the whole thing on the wire she wore under her coat. Elena hadn't just given Vargas his keys back. She had given the FBI the physical evidence they needed to link Vargas to the accounts. The microSD card was real, but Miller had already cloned the data. Vargas looked back at Elena as he was handcuffed. He didn't look angry. He looked impressed. He nodded once, acknowledging the checkmate. The sun was shining in Seattle. Elena sat in the corner office of the skyscraper that used to be Mark's domain. The sign on the wall no longer said Sterling Solutions. It said Vance Graphics and Design. She wasn't laundering money anymore. She had cooperated fully with the FBI, and in exchange for handing over the cartel boss and the evidence against Mark, she was granted full immunity and allowed to keep the legitimate assets of the company. It turns out, underneath the crime, Mark had actually built some decent software Elena now owned. She signed the final paper on her desk and looked up as the door opened. Jessica Tate stood there. She looked different. Her designer clothes were gone, replaced by a cheap department store suit. She looked tired. She had taken a plea deal, 2 years probation for testifying against Mark. She was free, but her reputation was destroyed. No one in the city would hire her. "Ms. Vance?" Jessica asked, her voice humble. "What do you want, Jessica?" Elena asked, not looking up from her paperwork. I heard you were hiring for a receptionist," Jessica stammered. "I need a job. No one else will take me. I have rent to pay." Elena looked at the woman who had mocked her children's clothes, the woman who had tried to steal her life. "I am hiring," Elena said coolly. "But the position is filled." "Please," Jessica begged. "I have nothing." "You have what you earned," Elena said. "Mark is serving 20 years for money laundering and conspiracy to commit murder. You helped him. I suggest you try the temp agency down the street. I hear they're looking for janitors." Jessica flinched. She turned and walked out, defeated. Elena swiveled her chair to look out the window. Down in the park below, Mrs. Gable was pushing the twins on the swings. They were laughing. They were safe. They had a home, a future, and a mother who would never let anyone hurt them again. Elena touched the silver locket around her neck. She had melted down her wedding ring and sold it to buy the twins ice cream. She picked up her phone and dialed the prison. She had one last message to deliver. "This is a prepaid call from an inmate," the automated voice said. "Hello?" Mark's voice was broken, weak. "It's me," Elena said. "Elena! Elena, please, you have to help me," Mark cried. "Grim quit. The public defender is an idiot. They seized everything. I don't even have money for commissary. Vargas's guys inside. They stare at me. I'm scared, Elle." "I know," Elena said softly. "I just wanted to tell you one thing, Mark." "What? What is it?" "I found the ancient history contract," she said. "And I found my self-respect. Don't call this number again." She hung up. Elena Vance stood up, grabbed her purse, and walked out of the office to go play with her children. She had arrived at the hearing with nothing but the truth. She left with everything that mattered. That is the story of how Elena Vance turned her darkest hour into her greatest victory. It reminds us that sometimes the people we underestimate the most are the ones holding all the cards. Mark thought money made him a king, but he forgot that a mother fighting for her children is the most dangerous force on earth. What would you have done if you were Elena? Would you have faced Vargas on that pier? Or would you have taken the witness protection? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of justice, betrayal, and the ultimate comeback, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a new story. We post new dramas every week. Thanks for listening, and see you in the next video.